The Iridian survey ship Stardust Drifter sliced through the silent, inky blackness of Sector 734, the Krellis Void. Its passage was a decadal ritual, a standard systems check logged meticulously within the Iridian hegemony's vast archives. Sector 734 resource null, starless, officially uninhabitable. On the bridge, the thrum of the engines was a monotonous lullaby, the patrol another tick on a long, uneventful tour. Its long-range sensors, meticulously calibrated to filter out the faint, insignificant biological traces of the exiled Terran's vermin, presumed by the hegemony to be centuries extinct, or, at best, devolved into non-sentient echoes, suddenly screamed. Multiple high-priority alerts cascaded across consoles, painting the serene bridge in jarring crimson. Captain Valerius Qatar, a veteran whose multifaceted eyes had witnessed countless desolate void sectors, swiveled in his command chair, his mandibles tightening with irritation. "Report!" he snapped, his voice cutting through the sudden cacophony. What derelict signal, what sensor ghost, triggers such an unwarranted fuss in this dustbin of the galaxy? The sensor technician, a young Iridian named Nova, her own mandibles clicking like dry leaves in a wind of disbelief, struggled to form words. Her gaze was fixed on her glowing display, her voice a strained whisper. "Sir, it's not a signal, it's a star. But the Krellis Void is starless. It's an artificial construct encasing nothingness. Yet it blazes with the energy of 1,000 suns. On the main holographic viewscreen, where only the cold, empty blackness of the void should have reigned, an image purposed, where no light should be, light now was. A colossal, latticework sphere, impossibly vast, filled their vision. It was a patchwork behemoth, its surface composed of visibly disparate, salvaged materials, asteroid fragments fused with the hulls of forgotten ships, crystalline structures of unknown origin crudely but effectively melded with industrial plating. From within its intricate frame, a furious, contained light pulsed, an impossible heart beating in the void. It was, undeniably, a Dyson sphere, built from what seemed to be cosmic debris, in the very system meant as humanity's quiet, darkened end. Captain Qatar stared, his seasoned officer's calm disrupted. The initial flicker of annoyance was extinguished, replaced by a profound, chilling shock that settled deep in his core, accompanied by a dawning, unwelcome sense of unease. His elongated fingers, usually so decisive on the controls, hovered motionless. Beside him, Nova worked with frantic precision, her own limbs trembling slightly as she cross-referenced the sphere's unique, almost chaotic energy patterns and its crude yet effective material joinery against the exhaustive historical databases of known spacefaring races. The sphere pulsed again, a silent, defiant monument. After several tense minutes, Nova looked up, her multifaceted eyes wide, reflecting the impossible glow from the viewscreen. "Captain," she breathed, her voice tight with rising certainty. "The FTL exhaust signatures, the quantum entanglement patterns embedded within the sphere's oldest, most weathered sections. They match archaic Terran design. Primitive, but undeniably Terran." The implication hung heavy in the recycled air of the bridge. The exiled humans, thought-lost, forgotten, or devolved into mindless scavengers for centuries, were the builder. Qatar's lips pursed. He issued a string of orders, his voice regaining its customary authority, though now permeated with a new grim caution. "Full sensor sweep, non-hostile approach posture. And send a high encryption, priority 1 report to Iridian Command. Immediately. Centuries dissolved." The sterile hum of the Stardust Drifter faded, replaced by the resonant grandeur of the Galactic Council chamber, a colossal amphitheater dominated by the imposing figures of the Iridian hegemony. Light from 1,000 captive stars glinted off their chitinous carapaces. Before them, a lone human representative stood, shoulders squared, a spark of defiance in their eyes even as the verdict, unanimous and cold, echoed through the vast space. Humanity, the Council declared, was found guilty of reckless technological advancement that threatened the delicate stability of the galaxy, of violating sacred interspecies protocols with their relentless curiosity and boundary pushing. The sentence: permanent, irrevocable exile. The human flotilla, a tragic collection of disarmed civilian transports, repurposed freighters, and crippled, powerless warships, was herded like chattel by sleek Iridian cruisers. Their destination, the Krellis Void. Aboard one of the hulking, scarred transports, a young engineering apprentice named Kyle Carter pressed his face to a viewport. He watched, his heart a cold stone in his chest, as the last familiar stars of the known galaxy dwindled, then vanished, swallowed by an ocean of absolute black. The weight of hopelessness, vast and crushing, settled upon the exiled fleet. The initial years in the Krellis Void were a symphony of suffering. Catastrophic life support failures echoed through the aging, overburdened ships, their metallic groans the only constant sound. Food and medical supplies dwindled with horrifying speed, sparking bitter, desperate internal strife over the last remaining scrap. The psychological toll of absolute isolation in a starless, resource-barren environment was a silent killer, driving many to madness or despair. The mortality rate climbed, a grim tally marked on makeshift bulkhead. Through it all, Kyle Carter, his youth rapidly eroding, could be found in the guts of dying ships, his hands raw, desperately trying to patch failing atmospheric scrubbers or coax flickering power conduits back to life with minimal tools and even less hope. Decades bled into one another, each more barren than the last. The human population had been decimated. Their infrastructure, scavenged from their own dying vessels, was crumbling. Grim projections showed inevitable extinction within another generation. It was in this suffocating atmosphere of impending doom that Kyle Carter, now a seasoned but profoundly weary engineer, his face etched with the lines of countless sleepless nights and impossible choices, stood before the fragmented, despairing Exile Council. He presented a proposal so radical, so utterly divorced from their reality, that it bordered on insanity. To harness the void itself, to build a shell around the nothingness and ignite a star where none existed, to construct a Dyson sphere from the very scraps of their dying world and whatever else they could find in the pitiless dark. The council chamber, a repurposed cargo bay cold enough to see their breath, erupted. Disbelief was the kindest reaction. Accusations of madness, of false hope, rained down upon Carter. Despairing ridicule followed. "A Dyson sphere?" one elder scoffed, his voice brittle. "With what, Carter? We have no star to encircle, no resources, barely enough manpower to run the recyclers." Yet Carter stood firm. His voice, hoarse but resonant with a desperate fire, cut through the cynicism. He laid out the brutal mathematics of their decline, the certainty of their slow, freezing, starving death. Then he painted a vision, not of ease, but of a fighting chance, a sliver of audacious, almost blasphemous hope. "It is our only alternative," he implored, his gaze sweeping over their gaunt faces. "To die passively, or to rage against the dying of our light with every last ounce of our being." The debate raged for days, fueled by desperation and the dregs of human spirit. Slowly, agonizingly, the tide turned. With no other viable options, with the abyss yawning before them, the remnants of humanity, driven by a primal, desperate will to survive, collectively agreed. They would commit to Kyle Carter's great work. They pooled their last meager resources, their fading knowledge, their exhausted bodies, and prepared to begin the impossible task of building a star in the empty heart of the Krellis Void. The Council's grim decree hung in the frigid void, a sentence of slow, quiet extinction. But the humans, huddled in the dying metal husks that had carried them to this starless tomb, refused to simply fade. With a desperate, collective will forged in the fires of their shared despair, they turned inwards, cannibalizing the very vessels that were their last link to a lost home. The Void System, Krellis 734, echoed not with the sounds of industry, but of mourning transformed into grim labor. Cutting torches screamed against stressed alloys, plasma drills bit into failing power conduits, and manipulator arms, once used for cargo, now meticulously stripped, every panel, every wire, every component, reducing proud ships to skeletal frames adrift in the black. Every ounce of metal, every functional circuit, every shard of reinforced glass was salvaged, sorted, and stockpiled. It was a meticulous, heartbreaking process, fueled by the understanding that this scrap was not just material, it was their future or their final failure. Early expeditions into the immediate, barren expanse of Krellis 734 were fraught with peril and yielded meager returns. Jury-rigged shuttlecraft, their life support systems patched with salvaged parts, and their engines sputtering on rationed fuel, nudged cautiously through the void. They hunted for rogue asteroid fragments, frozen chunks of cometary ice, anything that might contain trace elements or volatile compounds. Each sortie was a gamble against equipment failure, against the crushing cold, against the sheer, indifferent emptiness. Pilots returned with haunted eyes, their holds often containing little more than a few tons of rock and ice, a pittance against the colossal needs of their burgeoning, impossible dream. The risks were high, shuttles were lost, lives were forfeit, and the returns were devastatingly low. A critical assessment, delivered by the weary engineers poring over the meager resource projections, confirmed the brutal truth. The local, easily accessible resources of Krellis 734 were vastly, laughably insufficient. A Dyson sphere? Built from this? The data models screamed impossibility. Despair, a constant, gnawing companion since the exile, deepened its hold on many. Whispers of futility spread like a contagion through the cramped habitats. What were they doing? Prolonging the inevitable? But necessity, the sharpest spur humanity had ever known, drove them to look beyond the immediate, beyond the known. Human engineers, their minds sharpened by generations of problem-solving under pressure, led by the quietly relentless Kyle Carter, began to devise radical new methods. The void wasn't just empty, it was a graveyard. Ancient, forgotten derelict vessels from wars fought millennia ago, interstellar debris fields drifting between galaxies, even strange, non-baryonic traces hinted at by their salvage sensors, they were all potential resources. Dangerous, long-range void trawling missions were conceived, requiring ships that could navigate interstellar distances using cobbled-together FTL drives and survive hazards no one had charted. These were not ships of exploration, but of desperate deep space scavenging. A major technological breakthrough, born from countless hours of experimentation with alien alloys and repurposed energy fields, provided the first true glimmer of hope. They developed sophisticated, self-replicating nanite swarms. These weren't the sleek, sterile machines of galactic high-tech, but buzzing, chittering clouds of microscopic constructs visibly patched together from diverse origins. Yet they performed miracles. Exposed to any material, the crystalline structure of an iridian hull fragment, the dense core of a rogue planetoid, even the faint, exotic traces of dark matter hinted at by their sensors, the swarms would break it down, atom by atom, and reassemble it into standardized, usable construction elements. It was true scrap alchemy, turning the galaxy's refuse into the building blocks of their future. Another key innovation emerged from Kyle Carter's team, a daring application of salvage technology. Repurposing alien FTL field generators and gravimetric sensors, they implemented large-scale gravity net fishing. Massive energy-intensive fields were projected into the void, subtly manipulating the gravitational pull on rogue planetoids, large debris fields, and even distant dark stars. Slowly, painstakingly, these colossal masses were nudged onto trajectories that brought them into collection orbits within the Krellis system. It required immense, constant power, pushing their early rudimentary fusion reactors to their absolute limits, but it drastically increased their resource intake efficiency, providing the raw tonnage the nanites needed. With resources flowing, however inconsistently, the first major fabrication platforms were constructed. Gargantuan skeletal structures of fused scrap, they hung in the void, dripping with manipulator arms and energy conduits. Here, the processed materials were formed into the foundational structural elements of the Dyson sphere. Laying the first beams against the absolute blackness of the void was more than an engineering feat. It was an act of defiance, a visible mark that the great work had truly begun, serving as the central, ever-growing hub for all processed materials. Decades bled into centuries. Generations were born and died within the confines of the project, their lives defined by the sphere. Human society fully reoriented around the great work. Childhoods were spent learning the intricate dance of void trawling navigation or the delicate art of nanite swarm programming. Adulthood meant dedicating every waking hour to a specific role miner, fabricator, engineer, pilot, life support technician, recycler. It forged a highly specialized, single-minded culture bound together by the shared monumental task. The concept of home became synonymous not with a planet, but with the growing lattice of the sphere itself. Kyle Carter, the young engineer who had helped salvage the dying fleet, evolved into a respected, enduring leader. His hair grayed, his face etched with the lines of impossible burdens. He oversaw the complex logistics of a project spanning millions of cubic kilometers. He faced constant technical challenges, the inevitable failures of scrap-built systems, and the human challenges of maintaining morale across generations who had never known anything but this endless construction. Resolving disputes over resource allocation, whether to prioritize life support upgrades or another section of the sphere's framework, became a daily, agonizing task. A major structural failure tore through a rapidly expanding section of the sphere's framework, perhaps a stress fracture in a repurposed alien alloy beam, or an unforeseen resonance from a distant void anomaly. Metal screamed in protest before collapsing inwards. Alarms blared, emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but lives were lost. The section crumpled, a gaping wound in the growing lattice, a significant setback that threatened to halt the entire project, casting a pall of grief and doubt over the people of the sphere. But humanity rallied. Despair was acknowledged, mourned, then set aside. Applying their unique problem-solving skills honed by centuries of making the impossible work, Kyle and his teams devised an unconventional solution. It involved risky manual repairs in vacuum, using flexible, self-healing composites synthesized from salvaged biological and technological scrap. Innovative stress redistribution techniques, derived from their deep, intuitive understanding of their patchwork technology, were implemented, rerouting loads around the damaged section using temporary, jury-rigged supports that somehow held against cosmic forces. The sphere continued its relentless growth. Its scale became immense, awe-inspiring even to the humans building it. A colossal, glowing web visible across thousands of kilometers. Internal sections, once cramped and temporary, began to become truly habitable environments. Vast, fabricated landscapes bloomed under artificial sunlight, incorporating advanced life support and energy distribution systems painstakingly developed from repurposed alien technology, creating enclosed worlds within the void. Humans integrated salvaged alien computational cores and sensor arrays into the sphere's growing infrastructure. These ancient, powerful processors, stripped from long-dead vessels, yielded unexpected insights. Data streams revealed complex models of void physics that defied known galactic science and properties of exotic materials they had encountered in interstellar debris. These insights hinted at capabilities for the sphere far beyond mere energy generation or habitation, possibilities that stirred a quiet, dangerous ambition. The sheer volume of processed scrap and the unimaginable scale of construction reached a point where the Dyson sphere began to subtly affect the local gravitational field of the Krellis void system itself. Faint gravitational anomalies rippled outwards from the sphere's core. Energy distribution within the system shifted, drawn towards the hungry, growing structure. The void, once empty and indifferent, was being reshaped by human will. After centuries of relentless effort, sacrifice, and impossible ingenuity, the primary structure of the Dyson sphere was nearing completion. Or perhaps, it had reached a critical operational milestone, a point where its core function could be activated. It stood as a monument, forged from the very emptiness they were cast into, a testament to human resilience and the terrifying power of a species that refused to die. Humanity, now the people of the sphere, looked out from the artificial star they had built. They were no longer desperate exiles scrabbling for survival in the dark. They were a transformed society, masters of their impossible creation, having turned their tomb into a beacon of power in the void. Unbeknownst to them, the light of their impossible star was finally reaching outwards, unknowingly awaiting the rediscovery that would shake the galaxy. But even the combined remnants of a shattered fleet, cannibalized down to their very bones, offered only a finite pool of resources. The dream of the Dyson sphere, a structure that would dwarf any starship, any orbital habitat, demanded material on an astronomical scale. Initial scavenging of the immediate system, the icy comets and dust-laden asteroids of the Krellis void's inner reaches, yielded just enough to begin the impossible frame. It quickly became clear. The scale of the great work vastly outstripped the readily available scrap within easy reach. Survival necessitated pushing further into the deep void, beyond the system's defined, desolate edge. Necessity birthed the void trawler. These were not sleek, purpose-built explorers, but Frankenstein's monsters of salvaged engineering. Jury-rigged from the most robust, least damaged components of the original Exile fleet's cargo haulers and deep space tugs, their hulls were patchwork quilts of alien alloys and human composites, reinforced with the first crude heavy plates fabricated by the sphere's nascent foundry. Life support was jury-rigged redundancy. Drives were temperamental hybrids of salvaged FTL cores and human-designed reaction mass engines, and their missions could last for months, sometimes years, pushing into the crushing isolation and unknown hazards of interstellar space. One such vessel, the Stardust Eater, a trawler commanded by Ilara Vance, a woman whose face bore the lines of 1,000 void-darkened sunrises, was dispatched on a particularly audacious mission. Long-range passive sensors, themselves cobbled together from repurposed alien communication arrays, had detected faint, ancient energy traces emanating from a region far beyond the Krellis system's Oort cloud analog signatures that didn't match any known Iridian or Council technology. It hinted at derelict technology, perhaps from civilizations long gone, drifting in the cosmic currents. A potential treasure trove of raw material and advanced components, the journey was a brutal test of endurance. The deep Krellis void was not merely empty, it was hostile. They navigated the treacherous gravity gradients near rogue micro-black holes, unseen singularities that warped space-time like funhouse mirrors. Their hulls groaned under the assault of exotic radiation fields, forcing constant rerouting of power to shield emitters. Unpredictable micro-wormholes winked into existence, threatening to shear off sections of the ship or scatter the crew across light years. Their cobbled-together technology screamed in protest, alarms a constant companion to the low thrum of the engines. But they were equipped with humanity's most vital innovation, the self-replicating nanite swarms. Born from reverse engineering fragments of alien self-repair systems and environmental processors, these swarms were the true alchemists of the void. When they located a hazardous debris field, perhaps filled with unstable isotopes or protected by corrosive energy residue, the swarms were deployed. A shimmering cloud would engulf the wreckage, safely breaking down the hazardous elements, sorting materials at the molecular level, and processing them into standardized inert ingots and panels, ready for transport. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it allowed them to harvest resources no other species would dare touch, turning cosmic poison into building block. Finally, after months of bone-weary travel, they reached the source of the energy traces. It wasn't a single derelict, but a vast, silent graveyard of ships from a conflict that predated the Iridian hegemony by millennia. A field of ancient, non-Iridian wreckage, rich with alloys and technologies beyond human or even current Council understanding. But the graveyard was not unguarded. Dormant, automated defenses, forgotten sentinels of a dead war, stirred to life as the Stardust Eater approached. Energy barriers shimmered, automated weapon platforms tracked their movements, and subtle environmental traps localized gravity distortions. Phased matter fields activated. Bypassing them required not brute force, which they lacked, but ingenuity. Ilara's crew, intimately familiar with coaxing life from dead tech, used harmonic frequencies to disrupt the energy barriers, rerouted the weapon platform's targeting data by mimicking ancient IFF signals, and navigated the traps with a dancer's precision, their knowledge of mixed technologies allowing them to predict and counter the alien systems. Then, disaster. Deep within the wreckage field, a critical system failure tore through the Stardust Eater. Not a combat hit, but a cascade failure in the primary life support recyclers, likely exacerbated by cumulative radiation stress. Air quality plummeted, atmospheric scrubbers seized. With no spare parts designed for this specific, unique vessel, the crew was forced to improvise. Engineers stripped non-essential systems, cannibalized redundant power conduit, and jury-rigged a makeshift scrubber using chemical catalysts meant for fuel processing and a repurposed waste disposal unit's filtration system. It was crude, dangerous work, relying on their deep, intuitive understanding of how disparate technologies could be forced to interface, a skill honed over centuries of building the impossible. Back at the Sphere Hub, light years away, Kyle Carter, now a figure of quiet authority, his face etched with the weight of generations, monitored the mission data streams. The Stardust Eater's distress signal was faint, broken. He coordinated rescue efforts, deploying faster, but still agonizingly slow. Relief ships, but his primary role was remote technical guidance. Working from incomplete data, analyzing the trawler's failing schematics, he transmitted complex, on-the-fly repair instructions, talking the Stardust Eater's engineers through impossible fixes, his voice calm and steady across the vast, silent distance, a lifeline woven from knowledge and experience. The scavenging mission was completed. They extracted a massive haul of diverse, high-quality alien materials and several intact, advanced components, power cores, computational matrices, exotic alloy plating, but it came at a cost. The Stardust Eater limped home, scarred and battered, having lost several crew members to the Void's hazards and the system failure. Narrow escapes were the norm, not the exception in this work. Back at the Sphere, the newly acquired resources were met with grim gratitude. They were immediately fed into the massive fabrication network. Alien alloys were broken down by the nanites, their unique properties analyzed and integrated into new construction techniques. Advanced components were carefully studied, reverse-engineered where possible, or directly integrated into the Sphere's growing systems. The influx of material led to accelerated construction in key sections, enabling the development of more complex, more robust systems than previously possible. Human society on the Sphere had evolved into something unique, a collective entity defined by the Great Work. Specialized castes and workgroups dedicated themselves to specific aspects of the build. Core structure welders, their lives spent fusing colossal beams in the Sphere's skeleton. Energy conduit weavers, threading power lines across distances that defied comprehension. Environmental system fabricators, crafting the very air and light within the growing habitat. It was a multi-generational dedication, a society structured around the single monumental goal, each life a single stitch in the vast tapestry of the Sphere. But as the Sphere expanded, a new engineering challenge arose, one of scale itself. Maintaining structural integrity and ensuring efficient energy flow across the increasingly vast distances of the expanding framework became a critical problem. Resonance cascade threatened to tear sections apart, power transmission losses were immense, threatening to cripple the project's momentum. A team of human engineers, sequestered in labs built from salvaged components, grappled with the problem. They studied the principles derived from the alien tech salvaged by the trawlers, particularly devices that manipulated localized gravity and energy fields. They combined this with observations of the Krellis Void's own strange physics, the subtle gravitational anomalies, the exotic radiation. Their solution was unconventional, audacious, utilized precisely tuned resonance frequencies and localized gravity manipulation, not just to build, but to stabilize the structure and create energy conduits that weren't physical lines, but controlled distortions in spacetime, enhancing power transmission across unimaginable distances. The successful implementation of this new technique was another major technological leap, born not from a linear progression of science, but from necessity and the unique human ability to synthesize disparate knowledge, ancient alien principles, void physics, and their own hard-won engineering intuition. It was scrap alchemy on a fundamental level, turning abstract concepts into functional reality. With this breakthrough, significant visual milestones were reached rapidly. Vast internal habitat rings were completed, circular worlds hanging within the Sphere's shell, bathed in the soft artificial light of the core. Major structural arms, kilometers thick, linked across the void, forming the skeletal framework. Large-scale internal power distribution networks, shimmering with contained energy, came online. For the first time, the humans living within got a true glimpse of their future home, a tangible reality taking shape around them. The integration of the salvaged alien computational cores and sensor arrays allowed humanity to turn their gaze outwards, but also inward. They began mapping the subtle gravitational anomalies and energy fluctuations within the Krellis Void system itself. Realizing their colossal creation was having unforeseen, profound systemic effects on the very fabric of space-time around them. After centuries of relentless effort, of generations born and died beneath the skeletal frame, of countless sacrifices and unimaginable toil, the primary structural frame and most critical systems of the Dyson sphere were completed. It stood, a colossal, intricate monument forged from emptiness and scrap, a testament to human will. And the sphere's energy signature, powered by its unique core drawing energy from the void itself, or perhaps the system's central black hole, amplified by the vast collection surface, grew exponentially with each completed section. It was no longer a faint anomaly, but a significant, pulsating beacon in the Krellis void, a silent declaration to the uncaring galaxy. The visual confirmation of the impossible sphere, blazing where no star should be, hung in the air of the Stardust Drifter's bridge, a silent, screaming contradiction to everything Captain Cathar knew. Nova, the young sensor technician, still trembled, her mandibles clicking faintly. But duty, ingrained over cycles, asserted itself. She turned back to her console, fingers flying across the alien interface, compiling the raw data, filtering the sensor logs, translating the sheer, impossible energy signature into a format Iridian Command could process. "Report compiled, Captain," Nova announced, her voice thin but steadying. "Designation: Unidentified Artificial Megastructure, Krellis Void Sector 734. Energy output: estimated 1.2x 1028 watts, consistent with a Type 2 civilization Dyson sphere equivalent. Construction materials: analysis is incomplete, but initial spectral scans indicate a chaotic mix of heavy metals, exotic alloys, and organic compounds. Transmission initiated. Emergency priority. Direct to Hegemony High Command." Captain Cathar, his initial shock giving way to a cold professional dread, nodded curtly. "Acknowledged, Technician. Log entry. First contact protocol, level Gamma 7 initiated. Identify origin species if possible." The report, a torrent of impossible data and stunned eyewitness accounts, slammed into Iridian High Command like a rogue asteroid. Admiral Theron Veeler, a veteran whose career was built on the predictable, ordered galaxy, stared at the holo display of the Krellis void, where a star-sized anomaly pulsed with furious light. The accompanying report detailed the Stardust Drifter's findings, including Nova's initial hesitant identification of faint residual Terran FTL signatures near the structure's core. Terran exiles? Veeler rasped, the concept utterly alien. Impossible. Sector 734 was designated uninhabitable. Resource null. We left them with derelict transports and minimal supplies. Extinction was expected. Or at best, devolution into savagery. This defies logic. It defies physics. Panic, a rare commodity in the stoic ranks of the hegemony, began to ripple through the command center. The Krellis void was a forgotten corner, a dumping ground for a problem the galaxy had collectively decided to ignore centuries ago. Now, that problem had not only survived, but had apparently built a monument to defiance on a scale previously thought achievable only by ancient, long-vanished empires. News of the discovery did not remain confined to Iridian space for long. Encrypted reports, diplomatic whispers, and eventually, frantic, open transmissions from the Stardust Drifter's logs leaked and spread like wildfire across subspace channel. It reached the Galactic Council, the very body that had convened to condemn humanity centuries prior. In the grand, crystalline chambers of the Council, a sudden, chilling silence fell as the news arrived. Representatives of 1,000 species, from the towering, stoic Krill to the diminutive, chittering Zatari, stared at the projection of the impossible sphere. The air, usually filled with the murmur of political maneuvering and economic negotiation, grew thick with palpable shock and quickly fear. Old prejudices, the comfortable narrative of humanity as a reckless, short-sighted, primitive species, flared back to life, now tinged with a terrifying apprehension. Debates erupted, echoing through the chamber and spilling into private data channels and secure meeting rooms. Species that had voted for the exile were the most vocal, their initial disbelief curdling into accusations and demands for explanation. "It's a weapon!" shrieked the delegate from the Vrath Collective, their multi-jointed arms gesticulating wildly. "They have weaponized the void itself." This cannot be permitted. A more pragmatic voice, the calm, resonant tone of the Krill ambassador cut through the noise. Weapon or not, its existence is problematic. How? From what resources? The Krellis void is barren. This structure, it challenges our understanding of their capabilities and their intent. Intent? Scoffed a delegate from the mercantile Zatari. They were cast out. This is an act of aggression. A declaration of war built from the scraps of our galaxy. They argued, they speculated, they tried desperately to rationalize the impossible, to fit the image of the blazing sphere into their outdated understanding of the Terran vermin. Fear warred with intellectual curiosity, political expediency with genuine alarm. Meanwhile, deep within the Krellis void, within the heart of the structure that was shaking the galaxy, life continued with quiet purpose. Human long-range sensors, integrated into the very fabric of the Dyson sphere, had registered the Iridian ship's arrival cycles ago. They had noted its cautious approach, the initial probing scans, and then the sudden frantic surge of interstellar communication originating from its position. It wasn't panic on the sphere, not in the way the Iridians or the Council understood it. It was expected. In a spacious, yet functional chamber overlooking a vast, artificially lit habitat teeming with life, Sphere Humanity's leadership convened. The room wasn't opulent. Its walls were a patchwork of salvaged alloys and composite materials, the seams visible testaments to its origin. At the head of a long, scarred table sat Kyle Carter. Centuries had etched themselves onto his face, silvered his hair, but his eyes held the same unwavering focus, the same quiet strength that had guided them from the brink of extinction. Around him sat others, leaders forged in the crucible of the Void Engineers, scientists, strategists, representatives of the generations born and raised within the sphere. The Iridian vessel, Stardust Drifter, has confirmed our presence, Carter stated, his voice calm, carrying the weight of ages. They have reported back to their hegemony. The surge in subspace traffic indicates the news is spreading, likely reaching the Council. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, head of strategic analysis, spoke next. Analysis of the Iridian transmissions confirms widespread shock and alarm. Initial reactions range from disbelief to outright fear. Council debate is vigorous. The historical narrative of our exile is being revisited, shall we say, with renewed intensity. There was no fear in the room, only a deep collective readiness. Centuries of shared purpose, of building the impossible from nothing, had forged them into something new, something unified. They had anticipated this day, the day the galaxy remembered them. They will attempt contact, Carter predicted, his gaze sweeping over the faces around the table. They will demand answers. They will seek to understand how the vermin they cast into the dark built their own sun. He paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. We will respond, with dignity, with caution. We built this home from their discards. It is ours. We owe them no explanations. Back aboard the Stardust Drifter, tension was a physical presence. Captain Qatar stood stiffly on the bridge as the communications officer initiated the protocol. After the prompt, they were told to wait and try formal contact using strict, measured steps. The main screen lit up, making a stable link. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, the image perseveranced. It wasn't the bridge of a sleek, advanced vessel. It was a functional, almost Spartan room, and the face that appeared, it was undeniably human. Aged, yes, lines etched deep, but the eyes were clear, intelligent, and held a depth of experience that unnerved Qatar. Unidentified vessel, Cathar began formally, his voice tight. This is Captain Valerius Cathar of the Iridian Hegemony survey ship Stardust Drifter. We require identification and explanation for the existence of this structure. In designated uninhabited space. The human face remained impassive for a moment longer. Then, the figure spoke. His voice was calm, measured, carrying a subtle resonance that seemed to fill the bridge. This is Kyle Carter, speaking for the people of the sphere. We are the inhabitants of this system. This structure is our home. We are a sovereign entity. Your presence is noted. Cathar's mandibles twitched. Kyle Carter? People of the sphere? You are the Terran exiles? But that is impossible. The Krellis Void has no resources. How could you build this? What is its purpose? His professional facade cracked, revealing the sheer disbelief beneath. Nova, standing beside him, leaned forward slightly, her multifaceted eyes fixed on the screen. Her voice was softer, tinged with a desperate curiosity. Please, we were told. There was nothing here, only void. How? How did you do this? Carter's expression remained unreadable. We adapted. We built. We survived. He offered no details, no explanations of how. His gaze seemed to look through them, acknowledging their questions but offering no answers beyond the undeniable fact of their existence and sovereignty. After the tense, brief exchange, Captain Cathar, under orders from High Command, authorized a limited, controlled observation mission. Nova was selected, her expertise with sensors and data analysis deemed crucial, despite Qatar's reservations about her evident fascination. A small, automated drone, equipped with high-resolution cameras and spectral analyzers, was launched from the Stardust Drifter, guided towards the sphere's outer layers under strict remote control. From the drone's feed, projected onto a secondary screen on the Drifter's bridge, Nova saw it up close. The scale was breathtaking, filling the entire forward view. It wasn't a smooth, uniform surface. It was a colossal, intricate latticework, a dizzying array of beams, panels, conduits, and interlocking segments. Different sections had distinct appearances, some dark and pitted, clearly salvaged from ancient, unknown vessels. Others gleamed with the polished sheen of repurposed alloys. Still others pulsed with contained energy behind transparent reinforced plating. It was a cosmic patchwork quilt, stitched together from the detritus of the galaxy. Nova's initial ingrained view of humans as primitive vermin crumbled with every passing meter. This wasn't the work of savages. This was the work of engineers, of artists, of beings who had taken nothing and built everything. The sheer complexity, the visible ingenuity in how disparate materials were integrated, how energy flowed through makeshift conduits, how structural integrity was maintained across impossible spans. It was overwhelming. A dawning sense of awe, profound and humbling, began to replace her fear and prejudice. Captain Cathar, however, saw only threat. He watched the drone feed, his expression grim. He saw the visible power conduits, the potential hardpoints, the sheer terrifying scale of a structure built by a species he had been taught to dismiss. Their calm demeanor during contact, their refusal to explain, it wasn't dignity to him, it was arrogance. It was the confidence of a predator. They reveal nothing, Cathar growled, watching the drone transmit data. They sit on their thing, built from God knows what, in a system meant for their extinction, and simply state they are sovereign. This is not the behavior of a species grateful for rediscovery. This is defiant. This is a challenge. With the observation complete and a mountain of data compiled, the Stardust Drifter withdrew, maintaining a wary distance, the communication channel remaining open but silent, a thin thread connecting the shocked hegemony to the impossible reality in the void. The detailed Iridian report, now backed by visual data and spectral analysis confirming the sphere's artificial nature, human identity, and frankly terrifying energy output, was formally presented to the full Galactic Council. The political crisis, already simmering, boiled over. The debates intensified, shifting from bewildered speculation to urgent strategic assessment. The options laid bare were stark. Immediate military containment or destruction of the sphere before its capabilities could be fully understood. Cautious diplomatic engagement to probe their intentions and potentially acquire their technology, or attempting to ignore them, a plan deemed unwise given its strength. Driven by deep-seated fear and the historical prejudice that had led to the exile in the first place, a dominant faction, led by species like the Vrath and segments of the Iridian hegemony, pushed relentlessly for a military response. They framed it not as an attack, but as a necessary assessment of potential threat and a show of force to re-establish galactic order. The narrative was simple. The exiles were dangerous, unpredictable, and their impossible achievement proved they could not be allowed to exist unchecked. The vote was called. The air in the council chamber crackled with tension. The outcome, swayed by fear and the weight of history, was decisive. The Galactic Council formally voted to dispatch a significant multi-species fleet to the Krellis Void. Their orders were clear: investigate the sphere, contain sphere humanity within the system, and be prepared to neutralize them if they were deemed hostile or refused to submit to Council authority. The die was cast. The galaxy was coming for the exiles. Back on the sphere, the human leadership watched the subspace channels, monitoring the furious activity, the coded fleet mobilizations, the clear trajectory calculations. They had anticipated this. They had built for this. In the control center, under the artificial light of their sun, Kyle Carter stood before a holographic display showing the Krellis Void, the distant, retreating dot of the Iridian ship, and the growing number of converging vectors representing the approaching Council fleet. Around him, technicians calmly executed commands. Activate Phase 1 defenses, Carter ordered, his voice steady. Bring primary energy conduits to full readiness. Divert power to outer shield emitters. Prepare kinetic deterrence. All stations report green. Across the vast, intricate structure of the Dyson sphere, deep within its cobbled-together heart, immense systems stirred. Energy surged through conduits, repurposed from alien warships. Shield emitters, woven from salvaged materials and human ingenuity, began to hum, preparing to wrap their impossible home in layers of protective force. The people of the sphere, exiled to die in the dark, had built their star, and now they would defend it against the galaxy that had abandoned them. They were ready. The Galactic Council fleet hung at the edge of the Krellis Void, a crescent of polished metal and cold energy against the absolute black. Hundreds of vessels, from sleek cruisers to hulking dreadnoughts, held a formation designed to intimidate, their sheer presence a silent, crushing weight. High power scans, far exceeding anything the Stardust Drifter possessed, lanced out, bathing the colossal Dyson sphere in invisible light, attempting to pierce its secrets. A tight beam transmission lanced across the void, cutting through the silence. It originated from the lead Council vessel, a monolithic construct overflowing with weaponry. The voice, synthesized and quite detached, echoed through the sphere's external receivers, its tone one of firm command and some urgency. Sphere entity, this is the Galactic Council Exploration Team. You are in violation of Restricted Zone 734 protocols and harbor unauthorized, potentially hostile constructs. Stand down immediately. Reveal your full capabilities and the nature of this impossible structure. Explain your continued existence in this designated null space. Failure to comply will be met with appropriate force. Within the sphere, deep within a command center that hummed with contained power, Kyle Carter stood before a vast holo display depicting the approaching fleet. He was ancient now, his face a roadmap of centuries of struggle and triumph, but his eyes held the same spark of defiance they had when he was a young engineer clinging to a dying ship. He activated the outbound channel, his voice calm, steady, carrying the weight of generations. Galactic Council, you stand at the boundary of sovereign territory. This is sphere humanity. We are not an entity, nor are we unauthorized. This is our home. We will not stand down. We will not explain ourselves to those who cast us out to die. Know this: the sphere is our shield, our sustenance, and our future. It is far more than you can scan, and far more than you can comprehend. Turn back. The Council transmission remained silent for a beat, the arrogance momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of the response. Then, the synthesized voice returned, infused with cold fury. Insolente. Your primitive defiance changes nothing. You are exiles. Vermin. Your sovereignty is imaginary. Prepare to be pacified. Across the holo display, the Council fleet began to move. Formation tightened, weapons bays cycled open, probe swarms, glittering like metallic gnats, launched towards the sphere. Targeting systems locked on, lines of cold light settling onto the sphere's surface on the display. The air in the command center grew taut, but Kyle Carter did not flinch. This was the moment. Activate defensive protocols, he ordered, his voice quiet, but absolute. Full system engagement. Deep within the sphere's core, where repurposed alien tech intertwined with human ingenuity forged in the void, something fundamental shifted. It wasn't the whine of charging weapons or the thrum of shield generators. Instead, a wave, silent and invisible, pulsed outwards from the sphere's surface. It wasn't energy in any conventional sense, but a manipulation of the very geometry of space and time within the system boundary. On the Council fleet's bridges, chaos erupted. FTL drives, moments from spooling up for attack vectors, sputtered and died, their containment fields flickering erratically. Targeting computers shrieked, their locks dissolving as the distance and relative position of the sphere warped and shifted unpredictably. Communications fractured, signals scrambling into meaningless noise within the distorted field. Panic ripped through the Council fleet. Ships designed for precise high-speed combat found themselves adrift in a localized reality storm. Navigation systems failed, leading to near collisions. Some vessels, caught mid-maneuver, tumbled end over end. Others attempted desperate, blind FTL jumps, risking being torn apart by the unstable spacetime or flung into the void beyond the sphere's influence. The imposing formation dissolved into a scattering of crippled, disoriented hulls, their advanced weaponry useless against an enemy that didn't fight with beams or missiles, but with the fundamental laws of the universe they had learned to bend. Aboard the Stardust Drifter, tossed slightly by the localized spacetime turbulence, Nova watched the chaos unfold on her sensor screens. Alarms blared, but they were different alarms now, not detecting incoming fire, but fundamental physics violations. The sphere wasn't just using energy, it was sculpting reality. Targeting locks on her own console dissolved. Communications with the rest of the fleet became impossible. She saw the dreadnoughts, the symbols of galactic power, rendered impotent, flailing in the void. This wasn't just technology, it was voidcraft. Ingenuity born from the absolute lack of resources, from the desperate need to find power where none existed, from learning the dark secrets of a starless system. They hadn't just survived, they had mastered the darkness. Her awe, once a spark, solidified into profound absolute respect, washing away centuries of ingrained prejudice. The vermin had built a god engine from trash. Crippled, humiliated, and utterly defeated without a single shot fired at them, the remnants of the Council fleet ceased their frantic maneuvers. Their arrogant demands were replaced by desperate, fragmented pleas for cessation of the effect, for communication, for term. The sphere's grip on local spacetime remained firm, a silent, irrefutable demonstration of its absolute dominance within its self-made domain. Kyle Carter allowed the effect to persist just long enough for the message to sink in. Then, slowly, the spacetime field stabilized. Comms flickered back to life. Targeting systems settled, albeit shakily. He opened the channel again. "You demanded terms." His voice was calm but held an edge of steel. "Here are ours. Immediate and unconditional recognition of sphere humanity as a sovereign galactic power. Cessation of all hostile actions, now and forever. And a formal apology delivered to the sphere for the original act of exile and the suffering it caused. Accept or remain adrift." News of the Council fleet's catastrophic, inexplicable defeat at the hands of the supposedly dead exiles ripped across the galaxy like a physical shockwave. The image of the crippled dreadnoughts, helpless before an unseen force, dismantled millennia of carefully constructed prejudices. Humanity, the vermin exiled to a dustbin, had not merely survived. They had built a power that could unravel the most advanced fleets in existence. Each group, each power, each body had to rethink all that they held to be true. Concern mixed with wonder, pride with growing regard. Facing unprecedented internal upheaval and lacking any viable means to challenge the sphere's demonstrated capability, the Galactic Council convened an emergency, frantic session. The vote was swift, unanimous, and born of necessity. A formal declaration was broadcast. Sphere humanity was recognized as a sovereign power. The decree of exile was officially revoked. From his station overlooking the vast, intricate inner surface of the Dyson sphere, where artificial sunlight warmed thriving habitats and immense structures hummed with purpose, Kyle Carter, now an elder statesman of a new era, oversaw the cautious beginning of re-engagement. Small, unarmed diplomatic vessels from various species, no longer arrogant conquerors but hesitant supplicants, approached the sphere's designated docking ports. Trade routes were discussed, diplomatic channels established. It was a slow process, built on a foundation of earned respect, not subjugation. Kyle Carter stood at a panoramic viewport, looking out at the impossible star they had built. It wasn't a natural sun, but a contained fusion reaction, fueled by the void's secrets and the galaxy's discarded refuse, radiating light and warmth to the billions who now called the sphere home. They had been given a death sentence, exiled to the deepest dark, told they were insignificant. They had taken that darkness, scavenged the remnants of failure, and forged their own dawn. The galaxy had underestimated them. They were wrong. The vermin had built a sun,